Can you explain and tell us the GHK copper peptide is a really, really hot topic?
Yes.
And can you explain what it does, how it happens, how does it raise the levels of our GHK, this tiny little X39 patch?
Yes, great question. So minerals are actually, and GHK-Cu or GHK copper peptide, it's a peptide. A peptide is a collection of amino acids that's not big enough to be a big protein like, say, hemoglobin, but it's bigger than just a couple of amino acids put together. So we call it a peptide. And it binds to copper. Now, part of why I became fascinated by this technology, these products, is that I'm fascinated by minerals. Copper is a mineral, it's an element, it's in the periodic table of elements. If people want to learn more about this from me, I'm constantly educating people about this on my weekly webinars, where often I'll bring up these products because they're of value, obviously. Because we have to get our minerals right in order to have overall health and vitality. Many of many of the people watching, I mean, I have had certainly experiences with taking magnesium or taking Epsom salt baths. These are minerals. We're using them therapeutically, right? So we've used minerals for millennia in medicine. One of the things about minerals that is increasingly clear from the scientific literature is that they have to be in the right place. In other words, a mineral can basically become a loose cannon if it's not properly bound inside of a protein, right? And this is why when I started to see people who were what I suspected was copper toxic, we call it copper toxicity, or sometimes I call it copper overload. It's people who have too much copper in their diet, too much copper in their bodies, too much copper due to hormones or due to environmental contaminants, things like copper piping. There's a very clear sort of personality type and background that lends itself to this. And when I started to look at how these people were responding to the LifeWave patches, all of this made more sense. Because essentially what we're doing is we're taking free copper, which now from the literature we know is implicated in things like Alzheimer's disease, dementia, cognitive decline, the genesis of things like cancer, all sorts of diseases that we don't want, not to mention cardiovascular disease, still the #1 killer of Americans. When I saw that what we were doing was increasing a peptide that bound copper, and instead of that copper then creating what we call oxidative stress, free radical damage, and what I generally call metabolic mayhem within the human organism, and we put it to work doing what it's supposed to do with a peptide that binds it, that's when I thought, this makes sense. Because I've found that people have this, they struggle with this idea of, oh, there's this little thing, I put it on my body, and all of a sudden I get this really disproportionate big effect. Sounds too good to be true. But, you know, many things operate on these principles, like acupuncture, right? You place a needle in the body. I've seen people get amazing results with acupuncture, right? That's why the patches go on specific parts of the body, right? I've seen people with light therapy get amazing results. Usually it's with very expensive devices, as we talked about, or it's with radical lifestyle changes, which, you know, like, for example, people will like move to a tropical country and all of a sudden they're getting way more light. But for most people who are working an indoor job, that's not possible without, you know, basically going hungry. So they don't do it, and they can use the LifeWave patches in order to get the benefit of infrared light that they would otherwise need to get from the sun.
Right.